Yes, so I want to welcome everyone, and really, I'm happy to see you all here. 1 second, sorry. All right. So, hello everyone, and welcome to Financial Policy Council panel discussion on formidable foes: how powerful people stay alive with private security, private intelligence. Thank you for joining us today. We are pleased to welcome you. So great to see such a large turn out here. My name is Hiba Osman. I currently serve as the Executive Director of Financial.
No, Kyle is BA.
I'm sure that you will gain so much from this discussion today, so we kindly request to stay muted. So please mute your microphone. We'd like to take your questions in the chat box. The recorded version will be on the webinar of this webinar will be available. The webinar will be moderated by Mr. Ziad Abdelnour. Mr. Abdelnour, noted as one of the 500 most influential CEOs in the world. Ziad is president and CEO of Black Hawk Partners, chairman of the Financial Policy Council, and founder of Z-Sharp. Today, Mr. Abdelnour continues to be featured in hundreds of media channels and publications every year and is widely seen as one of the top business leaders by millions around the world. The best-selling author and world-renowned financier is on a mission to empower others to find their inner capitalist and build a life of real wealth and freedom. I would like to welcome our very special guest speakers who will be sharing their expertise in this field. Mr. Stephen Arnold, Lance Burton, Jack Devon, Dr. Omar Ahmada, Tim Callan, Barry Moniz. With that, I ask that you give your full attention to our panelists and help me in welcoming Mr. Ziad Abdelnour. Ziad, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hiba. I'm humbled. I didn't expect such an introduction as our new executive director. Thank you very much. What I'm going to do, since we are a lot of experts here and speakers, I'm going to describe 4 scenarios and see how our distinguished panelists would react in such situations and how would they handle each situation, each one of them from their own perspective. Now, I'm going to start with the scenario 1. I think my number 2 guy is spying for my competition, stealing information and trying to destroy my company. First question goes to Jack. Jack, you are acquainted with Aldrich Ames, the most notorious spy in CIA history. How much damage can an insider do?
Jack, you're muted.
Jack?
Jack, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
Wait, no
What
problem.
I said is, more than being acquainted with him, I actually went to his wedding. First day I arrived at Langley, he sat 5 feet from me. And years later, I ran into him in different jobs. So what's interesting, and again, I don't want to belabor because we got an awful lot to cover, but places like the CIA, the vast majority, 90% of the people believed it was impossible to have a spy because they were loyal and dedicated. And it doesn't, those that look at it frivolously, and I would call it that, don't appreciate that in the intelligence business, part of the job of every intelligence service is to get inside another entity. But this is true in the private sector as well. In Rick Ames' case, he had a huge ego, but his performance was very low. So the gap between the ego and performance made him a good candidate to undermine the intelligence business. Just like in a private sector, somebody has a large ego, think they're really important or not getting promoted, they then become a potential insider threat. In Rick's case, he walked into the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C., thought he was going to hustle the KGB and would give them just a little bit. Well, he gave them the names of 11 Russians that were agents of the CIA in the Kremlin and in the defense area. All 11 were executed. So when you're asking me about damage, it doesn't get worse than that. In the private sector, Normally people aren't killed because of the betrayal, but your business can be killed. I'm doing a case now, which I find, emblematic of what can go on. One of our clients is a Fortune 500 company, but like all of them, they're subject to hostile takeovers. And what you have is one of their competitors actually recruited a source at the C-suite level, and we're encouraging him to share information just in case they took over the company, he would be the CEO. And what happened over time is he left, and then he continued to work for that company and find sources inside. So it's not uncommon for in the private sector to have intelligence operations run inside of your company. Now, internal threat, and a lot of folks here are expert in that area. We put up great defenses around our information, better and better IT support. So I think many people that want to get inside the company now look to human beings. So companies are more interested in identifying people that are likely to download information and walk out the door and jeopardize the company. So
appreciate, Jack. I appreciate. If we can keep it, guys, no more than 2-3 minutes each response, since we have a lot of.
Thank you for that guidance. I'll keep it to 2 minutes. It's hard to talk about AIM in 2 minutes, but
no, it's great, Jack. No problem.
Good. We're good.
I'd like to have this next question to Steve on the same topic. Steve, what can I get from open source to check out this guy, the competitor? How do I get ahead of him?
Open source provides information about the person's interests, his contacts, the individuals and groups with whom he is interacting, and enormous amount of data are left behind by the children and the spouses. And those data can be pursued through online resources. We think about social media. There are tools like Social Bearing. There are ways to do searches across 70 videos. There are command line tools to download those data. So essentially a fairly significant picture can be assembled. The estimate is that if you compare what a Swedish or a European intelligence agency gathers, and you think of that as 100%, open source can contribute anywhere to 65 to 85% of that data. So it's useful, but not as comprehensive as a activity run by an intelligence agency.
So Steve, how do I get ahead of this guy, this spy? How do I crush him?
The thing that, in my experience, has been helpful is to identify the individual's behavior and then monitor that person. For $10, I can acquire from China fingernail-sized GPS trackers. Software can be used if you can have a company phone. Apps can be installed on that phone to allow intercept of the messages and email. If we're working for a government agency, there are more aggressive actions that can be taken. But the key is to observe and monitor and record those data. And at the appropriate time, I'll mention some of the systems that are available to companies to process that and convert it into a timeline. So you can see the individual location, interactions, and those data become very, very helpful in taking action.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Steve. Barry, what forensic investigation can be done with this? Can I trace his steps, or is it too late once he's there in my space?
If you're talking overall, I didn't hear the whole question. I don't know if you said currency or just overall.
No, I mean, I said basically what forensic investigation can be done with this. Can I trace his steps, or is it too late?
The answer is it really depends on what kind of spy or hacker it is trying to get in there and how good he is at covering his steps. I mean, in the cyber world, in the crypto world, everything can be traced. There is a possibility. People think data is deleted when they hit that delete button or take it out of the trash can. Not true. You can still go in there and recover data. And data is constantly being recorded everywhere. So the answer is it really depends on what they're trying to do and how they're going about doing it. Things such as, which is most important because I'm in the cybersecurity field and the forensics of internet and information technology systems, the biggest problem is social engineering. And that's where people are using unknowing or unknowledgeable staff to get information to be able to penetrate a system. So it'd be hard to track that interaction with another person where they're able to extract data.
That's very helpful. Lance, if I need some boots on the ground, what would an investigation of this guy entail?
Right. So Ziad, I listened to my colleagues here, which is great to be on with them. Such a level of experience is amazing to have on the panel. The first thing that comes to mind that I'd like to add is preemptive measures. You're going to hear me say that a lot today. Having someone or a program in place already before these things start to happen is key to the defense. As far as investigations go, after the damage has been done, it does become, more of a matter of cleaning up the mess to some degree and prevention at that point. Now, if they have known breaches, that's a different type of investigation than if there's a concern about a breach. So it depends on the status and the stage of where we're at. If there's, say the CEO comes and says, okay, I think that this is happening or could be happening, then at that point, you're going to want to insert what I would call, just for layman's terms, some form of counterintelligence operative that would be a part of that organization, unknowingly, of course, to the upper levels, except for maybe one or two people. If it's after the fact that they know there's been a breach, there's already been damage, then you can start doing forensic interviews of the people that were involved and whatnot to try to determine what all was taken, what happened, and then also to do prevention in the future. So those are the two elements. You have beforehand, after. Those investigations are slightly different, but I would say prevention is, and this is so important. I tell people all the time, preventative measures is key to everything. Having a solid counterintelligence program in your operation before this happens is critical.
I appreciate Lance. By the way, I use Lance services for some mission, and I'm absolutely super impressed by the way he does business. Thanks, you very much, Lance.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to another scenario here. And the first question goes to Jack. Okay, this situation. I'll be traveling to the third world to meet with some government officials. My intent is to do business with this country. But my local competitors may have connections to gangs, criminal gangs. Will my life be in danger? What can I do? Jack, how can the Arkin group help? Can you find me some leverage or good contacts to be on my side? I mean, how would I handle this?
You're muted again, Jack.
Jack.
somebody muted me on purpose. So I would just say that anybody that's doing business abroad, you need to have everyone has a PR firm, a lawyer in their organization, but you really need to be tied in with the security, physical security on the ground and investigative capabilities if you're going anywhere in the world. And I think the risk when you talk about criminal elements going against someone who's meeting with the government, depending on the country, are fairly low, but low risk are still not acceptable. And so I think it's important to make sure you have liaison with the government office, making sure you alert them. And then I think you need a physical group on the ground. Getting leverage takes time. So if you say you're going to go tomorrow morning, that's not going to work. We had a group that bought a plant in Russia, substantial, $300 million enterprise. And they bought it and they were going to visit. And the head of the company said, don't bother visiting because I'm a senior GRU officer, and if you come out, we'll break your legs. They phrased it differently, so they called me in panic and said, we made this investment and we couldn't go out there. This is why you have to have infrastructure, because what we did is found a former GRU general, right, who went in and it turned out this clown was a major. And he said, look, get out of here and take your friends. So we got that firm back to them. But that isn't something that's going to happen on the weekend. You have to have infrastructure and you have to know your country. You need intelligence assessments ahead of time. So prep work is really important. But if you think you're in danger, you better have a physical security team taking good care of you.
So Jack, when we talk about ahead of time, so how much time are we talking about? 3 months, 6 months, more?
No, it really depends on the country and the capabilities on the ground.
For example, excuse me to interrupt. For example, most of the African countries, Nigeria, Ghana, Togo. It's like a disaster.
Well, a lot of us are very wired. Okay, I'm just going to tell you that right here now. So if you're going to go to Africa, and you need to know what's going on there. I'm not talking about sitting down with an analytical product. I'm talking about what's going on, who can meet you at the airport, get you through, but who could also deal with the problems I'm talking about. But you have to have that network. That's what I'm saying. If you're a corporation or an individual, you're doing a lot of traveling, you need to develop relationships with people that can support you, just like you need PR and legal lands.
Mhm.
So people like many of us here, our businesses are wrapped around powerful networks of people in just about every country where you can get things done. Time is an issue, though.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Jack. Steve, is it possible to travel with a fake identity? Can I travel with a fake identity? Is that a good idea or not? Especially if I'm going to these very treacherous countries in Africa. Is it a good idea or is it really not that great?
It is getting more difficult to obtain identity cards and passports that will be accepted at a border crossing. But it is possible to purchase a passport. Typically, the easiest ones to get are from the EU and certain South American countries. Those typically should not be in the individual's name. A false identity needs to be created, and that has to be done with considerable care. Using a false identity has an element of risk, but trying to pass oneself off as a different person requires considerable training. It's not something casual.
Yeah.
Yes, so it can be done. How often is it done successfully? If you're trying to purchase a child in Trieste, sold by a parent in Romania, Estonia passports are available. That'll allow free movement, and it's possible to complete that transaction with no troubles whatsoever, and then use the Estonian passport to drive the child in west into London. And that is a common everyday occurrence. So that is in play. The locations to purchase those documents is also becoming more difficult. 1 year ago today, there were 4,400 active dark websites. And our research indicated there were about 75 that had fake documents, US, Canada, Eastern Europe, South America. Today, there are 1,000 of, the fella just told me earlier today, 1,480 dark websites online. And there are about 12 sites offering paper. Unfortunately, today, some of those sites will be run by law enforcement and intelligence agencies from countries outside the US. So the idea of having cutouts and false identities to use to buy a false identity is a very good idea. Things are getting more difficult. So short answer is absolutely, but make sure you're careful and don't make a mistake.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much, Steve. Just one last question, Steve. You're talking about the passports, the documents. How much on the average do these passports cost?
I'm doing a lecture about dark web false identity next week. The pricing ranges anywhere from about $900 to $3,500. Understand that the image provided to the paper maker has to move through the mail. And so keeping fingerprints off that stuff and using good operational procedures is essential. And then payment is in advance, and assume that you will be ripped off at least probably 20 to 40% of the time. But it can be done, and it is it is very difficult for law enforcement to stop the core 60, 70 sites on the dark web that are responsible for the majority of the documents, narcotics, CP, and other stuff.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Very much appreciated. Very helpful. A question to Omar. What kind of preparation and training can you provide so to keep me on my guard, Omar?
Ziad, I think the most important thing is really mindset and situational awareness training, making sure that people stay alert and aware of everything going on around them, and going in prepared, well prepared, as some people have already stated, in terms of where they're headed, having contacts, having good relationships, having backup plans. What we also do is take people out of country and place them in situations that are stressful, in areas where they don't understand the language, and run them through kidnap scenarios, kidnap prevention scenarios, to help them get used to things that are emotionally traumatic in preparation for, if they're a high target. But the primary thing really is mental preparation, and making sure the groundwork has been laid prior to departure.
Thank you, Omar. Lance, my man.
Sure.
If it gets really hairy, can you guys protect me? I mean, if I end up kidnapped or captured, can you break me out? Of course, for a price. Of course, you don't do it for free. I know you.
Right. Yeah. So the short answer, sir, is yes. Clearly, prevention is the best element there, and I think Jack was right on the money with that, where having a team in place beforehand, before you travel, is key. Now, I like to add a comment to that. So one of the things that we like to try to help people understand is, if you want a true executive protection team, it's better to have them embedded with the C-suite or the CEO or the person traveling for a period of time before the travels, not try to just do it the week before or something like that, or a couple of days before. The reason is because a very good executive protection team is now integrated into their kind of life. They get to know their movements, they get to know their habits, they get to know kind of how they like to do business. They get to know the places they like to go, how they like to do things. So you're integrated into it. There's already a lot of familiarity that develops. There's rapport, there's trust. There's all these things that happen beforehand, before you ever get on a plane somewhere together. And I find that this has been very critical to success for our teams. Now, that being said, if we get into a bad situation, clearly you're going to want to have a team that can help you, get out of that bad situation. That's why they're there. Ideally, you're not going to end up in some big, long, drawn-out gunfight. It's, they call it getting off the X. You do the defensive measures, move, and get out of there as soon as possible. But you're going to want to have seasoned, combat-hardened professionals, ideally, on your team, just in case things go bad. So, but that being said, the next stage being, if something does go bad, you didn't choose to have a team, now you've been kidnapped or whatnot, can we help you? Absolutely. Those operations are very, very dangerous and not cheap. But can it be done? 100%, it can be done.
So, for example, an operation like this will cost how much?
Well, to some degree, it depends upon the location, and it depends upon where they're being held and by whom. So we'd have to do an analysis of the danger level and the location, how hard a target we're dealing with and that kind of thing. I mean, just to give you a rough estimate, you're probably looking, frankly, at 1 to 2 million at a minimum for an operation like that.
Yeah, I thought so. All right, let's go to a third scenario.
Excuse me, may I show an example related to your asking about finding a partner? This is a more traditional approach, but we found it very helpful.
Yes, please, Steve, as long as we keep it short. Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
It's simply a picture.
Okay.
The research goes into investigating the contact point and then identifying the associates and the relationships. This type of diagram makes it possible to target a weak spot at an appropriate point in the organization. And these sorts of things are not something one does in an hour or two, but it can be very, very helpful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Steve. I'm sure a lot of people are going to rely on your services after this panel, this presentation, starting with me. Anyway, next, so I'm going to another scenario here. So I'm pretty sure that a competitor has stolen large parts of my code for his new product. It's worth millions. I need a copy, but he can't know I have it. Tim, would you set the scene? How often is data stolen like this?
Okay, well, what you have to know about programmers is they borrow code a lot. They have little segments that they've invented throughout their careers, and they reuse it as they go from job to job. But that's not what the scene is, or what the scenario is. The scenario is, okay, a programmer just left, he took all of your code, and your competitor has rebranded it and is selling it. Now, I can tell you right now that the police won't understand, the FBI won't understand. You'll have a very tough time getting them to act in a law enforcement capacity on something like this. What you need to do is get them into civil court and say, okay, these guys just stole my copyrighted code, but you have to make sure that it really is copyrighted code. I was told several years ago that if I wanted to hire a programming team in India for about 50 grand, I could have a white labeled Facebook with all the functionality like that. That's not actionable. it has to be the exact code. It has to be something that you can prove was yours. Well, first of all, you have to get a copy of their code so you can check it. And that's where you are. You got to get them from the code to the civil court.
Fascinating. Thank you, Tim. Stephen, back to Stephen. Stephen, how would I approach buying a software, the competitor software, without him knowing? Buying or getting my hands on, buy or other ways?
The textbook method is to have a third party set up a company and license the software development kit, pay the fee, and then that third party transmits the code and the documentation to the ultimate customer. And that requires an intermediary that can be trusted. A case about 5 years ago involved Silver Lake and a company called i2, Analyst Notebook, and Palantir Technologies. Palantir set up a third party using the father of the president, and the SDK allowed the deconstruction of the A and B file. I used to be an advisor to i2. That case went to court, as Tim accurately stated. The claims were in the tens of millions of dollars. It was settled out of court. That is a slick, simple way. The way that I have recommended doing it more recently is to use the resources of a company like Turing, which operates out of India, and a third party hires a programmer who has worked for the company whose code I want. I get that programmer instructions and have that individual recreate it, because Tim was very diplomatic by saying programmers reuse. No, programmers copy absolutely everything possible because you never know when you need it. And the people are essentially clueless about what kinds of data are carried out. And these third-party matchmaking services that operate at a high level can deliver essentially a former employee or a contractor who worked on a mission-critical system. And then that person in your employ can recreate or essentially output what you need.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Steve. Barry, my good friend, how do you protect the code under development, and what forensic tools are available to bring to bear to tell really if someone stole your code?
First of all, just to comment on the last question, I'd hire Lance to go kidnap the developer. That's all. Couldn't be easier than that, Lance. I mean, that's a no-brainer.
Brother.
That's a good one, Barry.
So and Lance actually hit the nail on the head even before I had a chance to, in relation to the question you asked me, and almost everything in technology, and that is proactive steps you take to prevent the unknown. There's nothing better than that. In this case, if I had developers writing code for me that I didn't want anybody to get, I would actually have it developed off the web, off the internet, in a enclosed or protected hardened network that is not penetratable from the outside. That's where the development would happen. Now, it depends the use of the application. Is it for internal use? Is it for public use? Is it for internet-facing use? In order to protect the use of it is, we've already heard, is almost impossible. I mean, if I've got a developer who's worked on it, is it a possibility to get them away from me at some point and to get some of my code? In terms of forensic, you can put backdoors in code that allow you to go in and see and get in from the outside and do things like that. But those developers who embedded that have the ability to take it out. So I'm going to basically say, I've not heard of anybody in the world who has had public-facing internet living applications that didn't have the possibility of being cracked, hacked, or stolen.
Fantastic. Well, you know what? There is a world of possibilities with you guys. It's wide open. I love it. It's so empowering. All right. I have another scenario here. Now, my daughter is dating a guy whom I suspect is a con man. He's after the family money. I know some of his past. He's a bad guy, but she's madly in love with him. What can I do? I start with Jack. Jack, you're a CIA director of operation and manage dozens of spies. How powerful are these kinds of personalities? She can't seem to resist. Is this possible? How do I get rid of this guy once and for all?
The key
Other than hiring Lance.
the key in the intelligence business and the human is recruiting people. And we're using con man here, but recruitment is a discipline and art. It's probably been around since Adam and Eve. I would recommend, I have no stake, no stock in it. Netflix needs some help here, but there's a program called, a show called The Bad Vegan. And I recommend it because it's a woman who sets up the most important or the most productive vegan restaurant in New York and around the world. And she's hustled by a con man. But in the program, she gets to talk about it, but they play tapes of him and his behavior. And it gives you the classic example of a con man. How someone as bright as she was fell for it is mystifying. So I think it would edify everybody, to tune into it. We had a case not too long ago of a fellow who was concerned because of his mother had taken a tour to North Africa and she met a charming guy. And he was in love with her and wrote to her. And he came to us. What we did is, as I said, again, you go back to the field on the team. You have a team in the field that investigate. You find out that, he's a scamster. This is what he does. He's a perpetual Casanova. Now, this is the downside of the whole story. And that in all these stories is the son went to the mother and said, look, here are the goods. We have it. She said, yeah, but I think he really loves me. And she went back. And of course, he scammed some money and it fell apart. So even when you present the facts, you'll be surprised how convinced people are of love. I'm going to stop on that note.
Jack, you're a wealth of information. Thank you so much. Wealth of information. Steve, once again, this is my daughter. I want to play dirty. What is the modern way to get rid of this guy?
Key is association and exploiting the feedback mechanism of algorithms today. This is a trigger warning, so if you're likely to be offended, avert your eyes. But what you do is take that individual and you associate them with child pornography, and using third parties send messages with that individual's name and personal identifying information attached. This is a dark website which allows children to be purchased. And then you connect that individual using his name. And again, some care is required to set it up to purchase drugs. This is a site in China which sells bulk fentanyl. It comes in essentially looking like baking powder boxes. And at that point, you do nothing. The automatic systems running in the US government and also out of Europol will make the match on that transaction, and the individual is essentially gone. So the modern technique is to exploit algorithmic feedback with connections to known sites that are being monitored.
I love it. I love it, Steve. Thank you very much. Barry, this guy is a competitor whiz. Really. So how can I set up a honeypot to track him in the act? Is it possible to do that?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, you'd have to probably want to get some sort of insight as to what this guy's into, what he's about, and if he's dating your daughter, you would know that stuff. By the way, when I asked your daughter out, I didn't mean anything bad. I know you don't have a daughter. I know you don't have a daughter. I know you don't have a daughter. Just don't call Lance. Anyway, point is that once you have an idea of what he likes, what he's into, where he goes, where he hangs out on site and things like that, you can create a site that would lure him in, that would then, as Steve says, link him to certain things, as well as extract data from his own machine. You don't have to only associate him with things on the outside. You use a honeypot, you bring him in there, you infiltrate his own data, his own computer, and put a Trojan in there, get into his computer, get his passwords, get his accounts, get everything he's into, and start screwing up his life. Transfer out his money. You can do all sorts of things.
Thank you very much, Barry. I knew you were going to say that. Omar, my man, can you train my children to be wary of this? My employees, what should they watch for? Can you train this? I don't have the time or no the opportunity to do it.
I can't even train my own children. They think dad is just paranoid. Yeah, sure, you can train people. Kids are difficult because they're so trusting usually and naive. But once people get burned, I think, then they get a bit more skeptical and trainable. So certainly, but like I said before, most of it is situational awareness. And unfortunately, you don't want to make people paranoid and skeptical. But what I about everything, but what I tell people is, don't be paranoid, just be prepared. And don't be over skeptical. Just, look at everything a little quizzically and make sure it checks out rather than walking into a situation completely trusting. So, I think background checks are easy. Open source information is easy. Paying $20 to one of the, websites to get somebody's background checks that's, readily available to the public. I think all that's justifiable and wise.
Thank you so much, Omar. Moving to my last scenario, then I'll leave it open to the audience for any questions they have, since we're getting close to an hour. So the last scenario, I have a friend of mine who's trying to rope me into something that looks suspiciously like money laundering. I told him this is a stupid and a crazy idea, but there's a lot of money involved. I mean, in the tens of millions. So how likely is it that this guy will get caught? Jack, how did the narco traffickers and terrorists launder money? Who's in charge of investigating such crimes, and are they good? Jack, you're muted. Jack, you're muted.
Right. The biggest problem the traffickers confront is what to do with the money. If you can imagine all those small bills that come in the narcotics business, how do you convert it? But at the end, what you'll find is there's a general way of putting it into the real estate, offshore accounts, companies. I mean, you have to bury it. You can't go and just use cash to buy a car. That's not going to do the job if you're into serious money laundering. Your second question is the FBI, DEA, Treasury, CIA all have different kinds of roles, and I think they're quite good. The problem is it's so massive, and I think someone earlier talked about different types of things where the bureau is not going to get involved because it's too small, right? If you have a minor thing. But let me just give you one cautionary note about the entire scenario, which is when your nose tells you something doesn't smell right, don't wait for a red flag. You get the yellow flag, walk away.
Yeah.
Money is always the draw. In other words, there's so much money. Maybe we won't get caught. I mean, this is a fool's game. And I'm just telling you, if there's anybody out there thinking, well, let me guess the percentages of whether we get caught, I think he's wrong. If you're really, if you think it's maybe legitimate, get legal counsel. They'll help you sort it out.
No, this is not. I will not touch this with 10 football. This is for him. And I told him how stupid it is. I want to hear it from you.
This is a real case. Right. Tell him you told him the right advice. You gave him great advice.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? I mean, in this stuff, we rely on your gut feeling, on your feeling of people, how you vet people and stuff like that. I totally understand what you're saying. Steve, can you describe how money laundering is investigated in the modern world? Do people still get away with it? I don't think so.
The money laundering is a very complex and dynamic business. Let's take an actual example. I think on your screen, you can see a segment of a flow out of a correspondent bank stream. I'm going to show you a system from France, not well known in the United States, called Preemptive. Preemptive has a new segment which ingests the bank data, and it will automatically discern suspicious activities, and those are in red. And then each of the colors identifies either the account registrant or the shell company to which the account is attached. Now, those tools operate in real time. And that means that the modern money launderer investigation is able to track and look. This makes it much easier to deal with large-scale money laundering activities. That's the reason oligarchs are buying very expensive yachts.
Yeah, I get
okay? The yachts may never be used, but the modern tools that I just showed you, such as the ones in use by the French Financial Authority, are not in the US at this time, but have really accelerated the prosecution rate. The Bitcoin transactions are also becoming easier to cross-correlate using the companies like Chainalysis, and there are several others. That makes it possible to de-anonymize both the creator of the account, which accepts Bitcoin, and the account which originated it. And once those 2 points are identified, IP data, time behavior are placed into a modern piece of intelware, and that intelware will then give a picture of that person's relationships. And so what you do is you go from the stream of data which an individual had to examine in the past to a real-time output and then a specific action.
That's very interesting. Thank you so much, Steve. Okay, we've been at it for an hour. I think I've asked most of my questions. I thank the panelists for their answers. Very insightful, very empowering. I'd like to open up to the audience, Hiba. I'm sure they have a lot of questions in the chat box. You can pick up the questions you want. I'm sure it's maybe more than we can handle all of them, but whatever we can handle and address to the panelists. Go ahead, Hiba.
Yes, I have one question, a couple of issues with a former discussion, constitutional rights to privacy versus surveillance, dark web, and the billions of dollars in selling personal information to use for leveraging financial gain, hackers, targeting friends of primarily targets to get around security, planted versus developed species, spies background, check psychological assessments and division. So
what's the question?
Yeah, so I was sending Hiba some thoughts on the first question that I wasn't involved with, that I just, some issues that I thought should be highlighted as well. There's no question around it, just to be aware of.
All right.
Okay.
So
next question.
I have a friend considering moving to Dubai to set up business in private financing. Are there any specific risks the panel would suggest to be aware of? Thank you in advance. This is Joel. So he's moving to Dubai to set up a business. So
I mean, this is such a broad question. Could you refine your question? Are there risks? There's a zillion risks out there.
Yeah,
Business risk, political risk, financial risks, security risks, etc.
yeah.
So what is your question? You have to be very specific, please.
Please, yeah. Maybe he will write another
Maybe
question.
you'll answer. Is that Joel Sadler?
Please, yeah, be specified if you can write your question. Okay, I have another question also from Stanford. Is it illegal to use remote phone hacks like auto forward spy, Heister mobile, phone spectre, etc.? And how does an individual or business protect ourselves and business against them?
Maybe I can start to answer that. I was in the signals intelligence world for a very long time. Yes, it is illegal in the United States to tap somebody else's phone without them knowing it. A possible exception to that would be if you're a business and you provide a phone to someone and specify that it may or may not be recorded. I mean, you would have to let somebody know in advance that there was a possibility that the phone would be recorded, and still you're in kind of a legal gray area. But that said, I mean, it is. I mean, if you're doing that to someone and they don't catch you, then it's very, very difficult to know what's going on there. And in some of the scenarios that we played back, I mean, if it were somebody, I mean, if it were a business thing, I probably wouldn't take that chance because I don't want to go to jail. But if it were somebody, I mean, if I had a daughter, if one of my nieces or nephews were in trouble, I might take that risk in order to protect the family. It's really a matter of risk profile in a lot of cases versus legality. I mean, nobody wants to risk jail time just for money, and some people will take a risk, will even risk their own lives for the betterment of their business. But I mean, when it comes to protecting your family, then you go all out, and then maybe it's worth the risk.
Very insightful, Tim. Thank you very much. Very smart.
So,
okay, Hiba, what's next?
Yeah, I don't have any more questions from the audience, maybe unless they want to ask direct questions. So shall we ask?
Yeah.
We want to ask. Yeah, please unmute yourself.
Joel Sadler said security risks.
Yes, I think Joel meant by that, like, if somebody want to start or set up a business, is there any problem you have faced before, or you have any history in that in Dubai? Any of the panelists have maybe any experience in Dubai?
Well, I'll start here and leave it to the panelists because I've been going a lot there and doing a lot of business there. Number one, 99% of what people say they are there, they're not. They're full of shit. All of them, most of them, liars, full of shit. They don't have money, it's borrowed money. They built a house of cards. They tell you that. Don't be fooled by names, the titles, the appearances. Do your homework. Do your homework like you're doing for everything, especially in the Middle East, especially in Dubai or in the UAE, etc. A lot of crap, a lot of house of cards. Do your homework like you're buying a security, a Bitcoin, an investment, anything. Don't be impressed by the nice cars and the Lamborghinis and the palaces. A lot of it is borrowed. That's number one thing I can say. And once you do that, you pass that, the rest is easy. It's even more important than security because you're going to spend a ton of money going there and not getting anything.
Yeah, if I could interject something real quick. If you plan to take your family to Dubai, make sure that your family knows the customs. I mean, I've not been to Dubai, but I know that there are a lot of customs. Like if you move to Singapore and your 17-year-old spits gum on the sidewalk, I mean, you're in trouble. Make sure that everybody associated with your company coming over from the United States understands the customs. There are certain Muslim sects that are very sensitive about their customs. You don't want to offend people, especially not unintentionally. I mean, you have to be. I mean, your family can get into big trouble very quickly if they're not prepared.
I have a question.
Anybody else would like to answer this question from our panelists?
Ziad?
Yeah.
It's Barry. You know, we've been talking about different ways that things can be done, the way hackers get in, everything else. Can we touch on for a second, you know, what people can actually do right now and the things they need to be aware of?
Of course,
to
of course.
avoid these things? You know,
Absolutely.
our focus at Computronics is on providing computer network support, focus on communication security for small, medium businesses, mostly in legal and financial. And what's most important, and again, you're going to hear it over and over in security in any aspect, and that is preventative, being proactive. And what I'd say needs to be done, especially when dealing with your business networks, you need to have an assessment done. Luckily, almost everybody knows somebody who's been hacked in some form or fashion, because everybody always said, not me, it'll never happen to my business. Well, now it's happened to almost everyone. That's the good thing, and that's the bad thing. The good thing is also insurance company and new laws like the Graham-Bleach-Lively Act now requires what's called penetration tests. And what that means is a company has to have their network checked yearly to make sure it's protected from the outside. So you need to take really 4 steps. Always, number 1, assess where you are in your technology and your security. Number 2, strategize, get a design of a solution, implement that solution, and most importantly, continually review and test your protection to make sure that you're at least 99% of the way there.
Thank you, Barry.
Sure. I'd ask Lance, you know, what do you do now if we can't afford to pay $1 million, you know, to after the fact? What's the best number 1 thing somebody could do to protect themselves in the physical world?
Right. So thanks, Barry. So in fact, while he was talking, I was sitting here thinking about all that. And one of the things that I found so far in this business that's been probably the most difficult thing to overcome with almost every client is them not believing they're in danger. Okay, so the number 1 fight most of us as providers have is actually getting them to believe that there's a risk and that the risk level is high enough to bring in a high-level professional to actually help them mitigate that risk. That's been the number 1 difficulty we've had. And honestly, a lot of the people out there that can afford services like yours, like mine, like those that are on this panel, you know, we're not cheap. There's a reason. We've got a lot of experience in these things. But a lot of times what I find is that there is a lot of people out there, businessmen out there that have a lot of money and they kind of believe that their money is a shield. And actually it's not, it's the reverse. The money actually attracts the bad guys, the people that want to exploit them, the people that want to hurt them, the people that want to kidnap them and do some things like that. So we've had that's one of our biggest things is helping people see, listen, having us there or having, whether it be proper cybersecurity, proper physical security and an executive protection team or whatnot, however, whatever element you want to address, having them there and ahead of time, I call them, it's like an insurance policy. And the way I try to help people understand it is this. If they're a big time businessman and they have, whether it be a house or their cars or whatever the stuff is that they have, I'll bet you they have insurance on it. The Porsche 911 in the parking lot out there, I'll bet you they have insurance on it. And they don't have insurance on it because they've been in an accident in the last 10 years. It doesn't matter. They might be in one tomorrow. That's always what it comes down to. And I find that helping people understand that the preventative element that Barry and I and some others have been talking about is so crucial to their protection. You don't want to have to call us after the fact to go do the rescue mission. That's the worst case scenario. You could have spent a fraction of that on just making sure that it didn't happen to begin with. So this to me has got to be one of the biggest keys I'd like to get across to the people there today that are listening is take action ahead of time, get a proper team, a proper cybersecurity team and whatnot in place before anything bad happens?
I would like to add on this a bit, since I have a hands-on experience with Lance, since I'm on the board of his company, of Storm also, and we dealt with specific clients, I brought him. So the problem, the issue, for example, we have this guy who was embezzled with $30 million by Russian mobsters, Russian and Middle Eastern mobsters, embezzled him of $30 million. So I told him, listen, we had a pitch, Lance and I, with him. He's a guy I've known for a long time. Told him, this is what we can do for you. It's going to cost you a couple of $1 million to do that. He has the money. It's not that he doesn't have the money, but he believes that, he's going to be, Interpol or somebody like this is going to help him more. They don't give a rat's ass, Interpol. Excuse my French.
Not their job.
Exactly, Steve. They don't give a rat's ass. It's like, I told him, they're not going to do nothing. They're going to go investigate, make some interviews. They're not going to do nothing. You're
Right.
going to lose all your $30 million. Even if we recover a piece of that $30 million, maybe you may not recover asset recovery, all of it, piece of it, you're going to make very well. But, people are not, when it comes to their lives, and he was threatened, of course. This is Russian mobsters and, Libyans and whatever. So,
Right.
I mean, it's unbelievable how some people react when it comes to their lives, with believing so much in the government authority or these other agencies who are going to go and help them. He's one of a million. So that's the challenge, is that people don't want to pay for these services, even when their lives are at risk. And I've seen it, I've witnessed it. I work with Lance on that. And I see how it's not, and that's not the only one, others too. The same story. That's a big challenge. People say, excuse me, one second, one last thing. People still, until today, with all the security gap, with all the terrorists, with all the shit, they still take it too lightly. It's going to be okay. No, it's not going to be okay, because when you're targeted, you're toast. Right. There's no okay. You're toast. You don't even realize it, but some people, do realize it. Whether hacking, whether kidnapping, whether embezzlement, whether whatever it is. And this is why we're having this panel, this seminar, because these are issues that are not addressed. Like some people told me, oh, I don't have to worry about that, etc. Because you're an idiot. That's why you don't have to worry about that. When you make your turnover is millions of dollars for your business, you've got to worry about that. Even if you think that people don't care, no, there are some prying eyes out there. I'm paranoid about this, but this is why nothing happens to me, because I'm paranoid about it. And I ask all the questions, and this is what each one of us should do. This is a very different world today than even 5 years ago when Jim Woolsey was giving his presentation to the Financial Policy Council. It wasn't like this 5 years ago. Now, forget about it. I mean, this is only a point I wanted to make, which is extremely important.
Yeah, Ziad, could I add something to that?
Please, go ahead.
Sure. So one of the things that we've been running multiple asset recovery operations over the last few years, and to just tag on to what you just said, sir. So one of the things I try to help people understand that what we do is we streamline the process and accelerate how fast you can potentially get a recovery. So the people that decide to only rely on the government services, whether it's the FBI, Interpol, whatever, what they have to realize is that the agents there, which I used to be one, they have multiple cases all going on at the same time. When I was working as an FBI agent, I might have 10 cases current constantly. You're working multiple sources, you're working multiple things, you have stuff going on every day. And that some of these investigations take a long time, and they're drawn out because the resources are somewhat spread thin. Well, but the difference of having someone like us or others in the panel that come in and help do these investigations is now you're the focus. Our client now, you're our focus. We don't have 15 other cases we're messing with. We're going to get this investigation done. We're going to go dig out everything we have to do. Can be very complex and very complicated, but we streamline and accelerate the process for them and actually give them their best chance of getting at least a part of the money back that they've lost.
Thank you, Les.
If I could interject and really echo what both Ziad and Lance have said, the naiveness of people is really astounding. There's a friend of a friend. He goes on the internet. He does broadcasts on YouTube. His name it goes by Coach Red Pill, and Coach Red Pill was in Ukraine. His wife is Ukrainian, but he sent them out of the country. Well, he stayed. About a week ago, Coach Red Pill, he was broadcasting something that the Ukrainian government didn't like. Ukrainians came and busted down his door. He happened to be out smoking at the time, so he escaped. Now, my instincts and my CIA training say, okay, it's time to get out of Dodge, do whatever you can, get out of the country, preserve your life. He decided he was going to stay, and he disappeared about 5 days ago, and nobody's heard from him since. Everybody, I mean, the consensus is that he's dead now. So you gotta go with the signs. I mean, you gotta be able to read this stuff.
Yeah.
May I add one thing? What my group has done over the years is build a list of individuals whom we've met at intelligence and law enforcement and military conferences. And I'm just not a golfer or a tennis player, but I do keep in touch with these people. And if I or someone who asks me about protecting themselves in a country, I will call one of these contacts and get a referral to former and trusted law enforcement or intelligence professionals, and then set it up so that the people are provided in country based on that trust relationship. And so the way it works is you go to a place, Lima.
Thank you.
Lima, and then you have lunch or dinner with the contact, and then the individual or individuals become part of an in-country entourage. It's like a group of friends traveling, doing things. And so you have language, you have a shared connection, and then you have trained people around you. And it's much more informal than trying to put something in place like 24/7 surveillance of a Japanese executive to track down his girlfriend. This is more of a friendly thing. And we've used that technique in China and the Middle East and also South America. But it takes this set of trusted connections to get the referral to the in-country resources who can provide that social protection, basically, because it's less likely to be taken out if you're in a group who look as though they belong in the country and understand the cultural signals. So that's just something from my experience that works. It's less expensive than flying people in and then setting them up, because that's big money. This method we've found can be effective and reduce the costs. And we haven't had anybody taken or killed. So, and I'm 77 and I've been fooling around in this for over 50 years. So, I don't think the next one up is going to get in trouble either. So it's been reliable.
Thank you so much, Steve. Okay, let's. I'd like to hear some closing remarks from each one of the panelists, and I will close also.
More questions? Can we take them, Ziad?
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. One more question.
All right. With increased monitoring and infringing on personal freedoms and hacking, Even for someone like Jeff Bezos, other than the typical antivirus, what are the top 3 tools one must use to protect one's phone and computer? How can we protect our computers and phones?
Hey, it's Barry. First and foremost, if you're talking about protecting, again, and I'm sorry, I have to go back to being proactive, you have to have a backup in place. You have to have a backup system that is running full time, that is tested to make sure it's backing up all your data. So whether you get ransomware, somebody deletes it, whatever happens, somebody steals your phone, you're able to get back your data as quickly as possible. Number 2, especially on your phones, most phones today can be attached to networks, specifically in the business environment, where it can be wiped instantly from anywhere. So if you happen to leave, or your laptop, if you happen to leave your phone or laptop in an airport, on an airplane, or somebody steals it, you have the ability to, within minutes, if not quicker, call your office and they can wipe it remotely, thereby removing all data. So, I mean, those are the 2 main things you need to do. And obviously you do have to have malware or some other form of, antivirus and anti-malware on there.
Thank you, Barry. Okay, I'd like to move to the closing remarks. I think we've been long enough here. Jack, could you start here, a couple of minutes closing remarks, each one of you, the panelists, and then I close. Thank you very much.
And I simply would say that there's a lot of power in intelligence and information. So whatever your problem is, you really need to understand the terrain. Wherever you're going to operate, you need to learn as much as you can. And don't do it on the cheap. Google search, I use it for minor things that I'm looking at, but you really need to know the companies you're dealing with, the people you're dealing with. I can't tell you how much of my business, I shouldn't say this, but a lot of it's because people don't do due diligence. They get themselves into problems because they just don't do the basic blocking and tackling. And then the only other thing is, you heard a lot of people talk about having networks. You need to have capability wherever you're going. You need to have on the ground capabilities, and you need to identify and develop relationships with those companies, just like you would with a lawyer, doctor, dentist, and an EG.
Thank you, Jack. Steve?
I'm essentially an analyst, and my focus is on the tools and software systems. And I think that being aware of what is available is a very important thing, and that's an educational step. So training in a company and also in a family about what to do and how to do certain things, and why you have 2 phones, one a burner that cannot be tied to you, easily discarded, and then one for other kinds of calls. This basic stuff has to be a part of the equipment for living. If it's not, I guarantee there will be trouble.
Thank you, Steve. Omar?
Thanks, Ziad. A couple of things. I think, mass shootings are getting more and more common. Violent engagements are getting more and more common. Thankfully, most of us never have to actually encounter those. But approximately 90% of people or more go to pieces and lose their heads and don't react properly if something like that happens suddenly. So I would take away from this to make sure that you're well prepared, that you get the training needed, and that you know how to react to keep yourself and your family safe. And it's not direct engagement, except in the last, unless there's no other option. What we really recommend is avoidance, situational awareness, and disengagement as quickly as possible from those situations.
Thank you, Omar. Barry?
So I would say a couple of things. Number one, you need to be aware of what could happen. Whether it's your business or you personally, obviously from my standpoint, it's your networks, it's your livelihood of all your data. You need to know you are a target and it will happen. It's not if, it's when. You need to be prepared with proactive measures. And most importantly, on top of the proactive measures, you must have a disaster recovery plan. We've all been saying pretty much the same things. Get your network in place, get your systems in place to be prepared when things happen, because it will in today's world.
Thank you, Barry. Lance?
Yes, sir. So I think, of course, everyone has made great points that I would agree with 100%. to add one last thing to it, do not be afraid to spend some money on professionals to ensure you don't have catastrophic failure. This is for me, this is one of the most critical things. People hate spending money on security. They just hate it. I know this. I've dealt with a lot of people now the last few years and trying to help them out. And the reason is because they feel like that money is not necessarily giving them anything because they don't see the results per se. Well, the result is that nothing happens. So it's not as visible as some other sort of investment into their business. But doing the things to make sure they're protected ahead of time is crucial. This is what prevents catastrophic failure. I just had a meeting with a space company that we're discussing doing business together. And the reality of it is I told them, I said, listen, you are absolutely a target for foreign intelligence. Absolutely a target for foreign. You can't just say, well, we might be, it's possible. You absolutely are a target. The senior personnel at the C-suite level, the owners, they are absolutely targets for not only foreign intelligence, but potentially more than that by other people that are out there, because so much is at stake. You have to take the steps ahead of time to get ahead of it, ensure everyone's kept safe, including the networks, the personnel, and the key owners and whatnot of the company. Don't be afraid to spend some money on it to make sure that you don't have catastrophic failure. Because if they're not a state, if this is a private company, you're not a state-run institution. I told them, I was giving them examples of, say, for example, a professor at Texas A&M who was, discovered selling secrets to the Chinese a couple of years ago about the ISS. Okay, well, what happened to that institution? They survived. Why did they survive? Because they're a public entity. You're a private company and stuff like that happens, you're going down. That company is going to go up in flames. So the whole endeavor is gone if you're not careful. So you have to know.
Thank you, Lance.
Yes, sir.
Tim, go ahead.
There's an old adage, if you can afford to buy your way out of a problem, then you don't have a problem. But this seminar is not about problems that you can buy your way out of. This is the title of the seminar mentions staying alive, and that's worth any amount of money that you can put forward. I mean, that's why we have Lance here, and he's quoting $2 million to rescue you, because in that circumstance, it's worth it. But in your day-to-day life, I mean, Barry's right. I mean, you're going to get hit, and you have to figure out what are you willing to risk to get justice for that hit, and is it worth going after? Who's going to support you? You really need guys like Barry and Lance and Steve and Omar and Jack on your team. You need to have those resources in place as you operate, not when you absolutely need them. And that's how high net worth individuals stay alive. They're prepared. They know what tools they're going to need, and they're able to reach them when they do need it.
Thank you, Tim. I'd like to close by saying, first, I'd like to thank you all for attending this. We're going to be doing a webinar or live event once a month. Next one is going to be on the cannabis industry. As you see, we tackle issues, problems head on, and we bring in experts in that space or any other space to find solutions. We're not here a think tank to talk about theory. We are here to find solutions to very thorny issues facing us today, from security to wealth creation to you name it, any asset class. This is what the Financial Policy Council is all about. We're fiercely independent. We're not bankrolled by any lobbying group. We stay to remain independent, truthful, and the whole name of the game is empowering you, the people. So our seminars, our live events, our webinars are all open. This is no theory here. We don't do theories. We talk about practical matters, how to resolve them, how to create wealth, how to protect yourself, etc. We hope you will become regulars to our event. I know there are a lot of regulars already. regulars, bring in more people, inject more firepower to that, because at the end of the day, this is what it's all about. It's all about empowering yourself with first-class know-how, education from experts. We're not here we don't deal with economists and lawyers and bankers and professors. This is not academia. This is all practical matters. And we intend to keep it that way. Thank you so much for your support. Hope to see you the next one.